Good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP, a national nonprofit transportation research organization based in Washington, D.C. Today's webinar, we're going to release a new report looking at the condition and safety on Pennsylvania's system of local roads and bridges. I'm going to be joined today by Robert Karl. He's President and CEO of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, and also by Matt Espinche, who's the president of the Pennsylvania State Grange. And I'm thankful that both gentlemen took time today to join us and give a little extra added perspective on the impact of the state's local road system on their communities. In terms of the format, I'll go ahead and present the findings of the TRIP report. And then after we hear from Robert and Matt, we will invite question and answers. If you indicate with the raise hand function, you could or provide or make a question, and then my colleague Carolyn Boniface will recognize that, and you'll be elevated to the panel so that you can interact with us normally with questions or any follow-up questions you may have. TRIP has been releasing reports like this now since 1971. During that period, we've prepared and released over 600 reports at the state and national level. TRIP as an organization is supported by a coalition of manufacturing, insurance, construction, labor, and engineering organizations who look to us to put out reports that provide the latest information on the condition of the nation's transportation system and also its performance in terms of safety and also its contribution to economic growth across the country. The report today is based on information that we received from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation based on our request for data. We're defining local roads and bridges in Pennsylvania as roads and bridges that are not part of the National Highway System. The National Highway System, or the NHS, is designated by the federal government to be a state or region's most critical economic routes, and typically include the interstate highway system and other major interstates or other major highways. So this report really focuses on the rest of the roads across the state. Obviously, roadways that are absolutely vital for people's daily lives as they move around a region, as they travel to work, to shopping, taking kids to school. It's all those other roadways that are so absolutely vital to the functioning of our communities. In terms of the data itself, the pavement data is strictly for state-maintained local roads, and PennDOT maintains a significant share of the miles of roads across the state. In terms of bridges, it's essentially all bridges across the state. And when we talk about traffic fatalities and the traffic fatality rate, it is for all local roads across the state, whether they're maintained by local or state government. We know that these roadways are carrying approximately 44% of all travel in the state and account for about 94% of roadway mileage and 75% of the state's bridges. So really a very critical amount of roadways and bridges across the state. We've also, in the report, or excuse me, in the news releases that we're releasing as part of this, have taken the data. The data is available in the report county by county, but we've also grouped those counties by urban areas in our news releases. So data specific to the Erie region, or Harrisburg, to Lehigh Valley, to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and then finally to the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, can also be obtained by looking at the news releases that we've posted on our website. In my initial comments, I'll provide data broken down for the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia area. For reporters from other urban areas, in the question and answer section, if you ask, I'll be happy to go through that data, again, grouped by your urban area. The report found that in the Pennsylvania area, I'll point out that we point out in the report that vehicle travel has now, after dropping dramatically during the initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, have returned to pre-COVID levels. In fact, in 2004, vehicle miles of travel in Pennsylvania increased by 3%. So we see a lot. That's a good sign. It reflects economic growth, but it also means that the wear and tear on our system has returned to pre-pandemic levels and is now beginning to exceed those levels. The report found that in Pennsylvania, in terms of pavement conditions, 23% of Pennsylvania's local roads are rated in poor condition, and another 23% are rated in fair condition. In the Philadelphia area, the TRIP report estimates that 30% of local roads, excuse me, the report finds that in the Philadelphia area, 30% of local roads are rated in poor condition and 35% are rated in fair condition. The report found that in the Pittsburgh area, 38% of local roads are rated in poor condition and 23% are rated in fair condition. The report also looked at the state's local bridges, and the report found that 14% of Pennsylvania's local bridges are rated in poor condition and in need of immediate repair, and 52% are rated in fair condition. The TRIP report found that in the Philadelphia area, 16% of local bridges are rated in poor condition and in need of immediate repair, and 58% are rated in fair condition. In the Pittsburgh area, TRIP found that 15% of local bridges are rated in poor condition and in need of immediate repair, and 50% are rated in fair condition. The report also looked at traffic safety and noted that from 2019 to 2023, there have been approximately 3,400 traffic fatalities on the state and local roads. This represents 58% of all traffic fatalities in Pennsylvania during that period, and the rate of traffic fatalities on the state's local roads is approximately 80% higher than on all other roadways in the state. In the Philadelphia area, the report found that there were 121 traffic fatalities annually over the last 5 years on the region's local roads at a fatality rate of 1.26 traffic fatalities per 100 million miles. In the Pittsburgh area, the TRIP report found that over the last 5 years, there were an average of 107 traffic fatalities annually on the region's local roads at a rate of 1.33 traffic fatalities for every 100 million miles of travel. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Transportation put out a comprehensive report looking at a broad, holistic approach to reducing traffic fatalities across the country, and it found one of the key components is efforts to make roadway safety, to improve roadway safety features. And clearly in Pennsylvania, if state and local governments have adequate resources, they can do a lot of cost-effective improvements to roadways, everything from improved lane markings and better lighting to adding turn lanes where appropriate and adding paved shoulders and rumble strips to make the system safer. But obviously that takes additional resources, as it also would be needed to further improve bridge conditions and roadway pavements across the state. We point out in the report that one of the challenges in Pennsylvania is that as the state moves forward, they anticipate a funding shortfall in terms of maintaining local roads and bridges. And with limited resources, they have to make the difficult decision to prioritize the major highways across the state, and that can impact the quality of local roads and bridges as the state falls short in having adequate resources to address those challenges. One of the most critical challenges that state and local governments are facing is a significant increase in inflation for highway construction costs. Since the beginning of 2022, the rate of highway construction cost inflation is 54%. And that has really been a significant challenge as the state has benefited from increased federal funding due to the 2021 passage of a federal surface transportation bill. But the reality is that we've seen that inflation has actually superseded the additional funding at the federal level. In conclusion, the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and local governments continue to do a good job with the resources they have available to maintain local roads and bridges, but they continue to fall behind as inflation overcomes the additional resources they've found. And moving forward, state and local governments will face a significant challenge in improving local roads and bridges and also improving safety on these vital transportation links. With that, I'm going to ask Robert to provide some comments.
Well, thank you very much, Rocky. Appreciate being a part of this press conference today. We thank TRIP as well as the Keystone Transportation Funding Coalition and PennDOT, who we all work with in collaboration. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has a very, very active infrastructure committee that meets monthly to address our infrastructure issues here in the greater Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, Schuylkill County region. Just to reiterate some of what Rocky has already spoken about, here in Schuylkill County, we have 344 state bridges, of which currently 49 are considered to be in poor condition. We have 160 municipal bridges in Schuylkill County, of which 66 are considered to be in poor condition. When we look at Schuylkill County, we encompass 783 square miles. That is the third largest county geographic landmass in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have a population of 144,000 people in Schuylkill County over that 783 square miles. So why I tell you that is because you need a lot of roads and bridges to get people over a large landmass in what is essentially mostly a rural county. Schuylkill County is pretty rural as rural counties go. And we only have one city, and that's the city of Pottsville. So what we're talking about today is extremely, extremely important. I would also state that we are somewhat blessed in Schuylkill County for commerce by being situated between I-81 to our north and I-78 to our south. And while that's not what we're talking about today, because that's interstate and federal funding, the importance of that information is that PA Route 61 connects I-81 to I-78. PA Route 61 was in fairly horrific shape, and over the last number of decades, we have worked very hard with funding to get it restored. To give you a perspective on the funding issue, on that current project, we're in the last leg of it, the last 4.4 miles of this stretch between I-81 and I-78. That last 4.4 miles was just let last year. And that project came in at $115 million, which is the largest PennDOT 5.0 project in the history of PennDOT 5.0. And what I'd also like to say about that project is it encompasses only 4.4 miles, but includes over those 4.4 miles, 10 miles or 10 different bridges that have to be either restored, replaced, and that 4.4 miles is a huge element of commerce, both for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and for Schuylkill County. The current estimate of travel vehicles on that 4.4 mile section right now is just shy of 22,000 vehicles a day. And this becomes very, very critical because of what happened with that project. We have fought for over a decade to get this last 4.4 miles funded and underway. We had to have an infra grant to help do it, $20-some million infra grant, along with PennDOT's allocation and our NEPA allocation from the Northeast Pennsylvania Alliance. At the end of the day, that project began just a number of years ago, estimated at $60 million. And by the time it was let, it was $115 million, which just shows you the escalating construction costs that Rocky has spoken about and that we're extremely challenged about in all Commonwealth of Pennsylvania projects. And the last thing that I would say is we, as along with other states in our nation, are fighting not only inflation, rising construction costs, but we're challenged with the fact that with the advent of more fuel-efficient vehicles, and to some degree the advent of alternative vehicles like electric vehicles. In Pennsylvania, we rely heavily on gas tax for funding, and we're really going to need to revamp that philosophy as vehicles become much more efficient, and obviously alternative vehicles from fuel sources are developed, which means that the revenue that we're going to garner from that is going to lessen, and we need to figure out other ways to fund these deficient roads and bridges. So in conclusion, the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce and our Infrastructure Committee stands behind all the efforts of PennDOT, Secretary Carroll, TRIP, and of course KTFC to continue the battle to make sure our Commonwealth is funded and that commerce is conducted across our critical roads and bridges.
Thank you, Robert. We'll now hear from Matt.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rocky and Trip, for allowing me to be part of this program today. Especially appreciate all the information that was compiled into this very compelling report that we have before us today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Espenshade. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania State Grange. The Grange is a family-oriented fraternal organization that advocates for issues that are important to agriculture and rural communities. We have approximately 170 local and county chapters located across the state, almost exclusively located in rural areas. And we've been an advocate for these communities since 1873. And if you look at the heart of these communities, many times you'll find the same thing, and that's agriculture, which is our state's leading industry and an economic driver. And as president of the Pennsylvania State Grange and as a dairy farmer myself, I understand how critical it is for producers to be able to transport agricultural products both safely and promptly. Our farming operations also depend on deliveries of feed and fuel and other necessities for our farming operations to run smoothly. And safe and efficient travel is critical to the success of our agricultural community, and investment to maintain and improve our local roads and bridges is critical. Agriculture relies on local bridges and local roads, and due to certain conditions, we face issues with detours and access to our fields and to our customers, basically. This is costing additional dollars to our bottom line, and it's impacting our profitability. I think it's important to also remember one point as we looked at the findings in this report, that these ratings and conditions are based on what you could call family vehicles. Agricultural equipment is significantly heavier, and we've all been stuck behind vehicles and on the roads from time to time, especially during planting or harvest season. You know the size and the scale of today's modern farm equipment is significantly higher than it was just 30 years ago. And for those roads that are and bridges that are in fair, good conditions, those are contributing significant limitations to our ability to move from place to place efficiently. Now, the other thing to make note is that fuel efficiency isn't exactly one of the primary things that farm equipment is known for. There's a lot higher cost to operate within the community than the general farm equipment than for the general public, and it's an overall burden to our economic stability. So we've seen firsthand the limitations that we have for funding and being able to maintain and repair our local roads and bridges. And it's quite frankly that our local governments just do not have the budget to make the necessary repairs that are required. So we're looking for further help from the state, which would help with these challenges. Our local roads are a critical artery. They are the lifeblood of our local communities. And because of the increased construction costs and the evolving transportation demands, we're falling behind. It's pretty safe to say. The Federal Highway Administration has pointed out that the labor and materials increase has increased 54% just from 2022. These are the same kind of the expenses that our local communities are facing too. I think one of the challenges with is our local bridges. I look at my home county in Lancaster, where we have 888 bridges. 600 of them are considered fair or poor, and given the limitation that farm equipment has to go over bridges that are kind of questionable, it's really putting a challenge on our farming community. We're going to have to take alternate routes, making longer travel times, higher fuel costs, and we just need to really continue to work on making sure that our roads and bridges are maintained properly. I think one thing that we could overall look at three things of why the investment in local roads is critical. One is the just overall improving our quality of life, being able to move freely from place to place, unencumbered, without worrying if the road is going to be able to get us from point A to point B. This investment will also facilitate economic growth. We're going to perpetuate commerce by being able to transfer our goods and products from where they need to be to the places that need to the places and the people that need the most. And this investment will states where businesses will choose to and places out of state. So it's our hope that the state legislature will look seriously at these findings that are published in this report today, and they'll take note of the critical need for and take appropriate action for as they consider the budget today. So again, thank you to Tripp and Rocky and the work that went into making this report. I find it very compelling.
Thank you, Matt. I'll now call on Carolyn Kelly, my colleague, to explain how we will proceed with question and answers.
Thanks, Rocky, and thanks again to Bob and Matt for joining us this morning. It's also always helpful to have a local perspective. So as Rocky noted at the beginning of the news conference, we'll now be able to do a Q&A with those reporters who are on the call with us this morning. As Rocky noted, you can either use the raise hand function at the bottom, and I'll be able to promote you to a panelist. So we'll be able to see and hear you, and you can ask your question live. You can also use the chat function that you see at the bottom of the screen. And if you've got a question that you'd like to enter in the chat function, if you're not up for joining us live, I can read those questions. So while we wait for some questions to come in, I'll also note that the full report that we're releasing today is now available on the TRIP website. You can find that at TripNet, that's TRIPNET.org. So the full report will be there, as well as some of the regional news releases for the urban areas. We'll also have a recording of this news conference that we'll have up there within the next hour or so. So you can look for that there as well. I see one hand up from Tom Shortell. So Tom, I will promote you to a panelist. And once you unmute your line, you'll be able to ask your question live. All right, Tom, you can go ahead.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we're fine.
Great, thank you. A few years back, the state engaged in an unusual like P3 project to try to get a lot of its bridges up to speed. The state described that as being very successful, but obviously there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of local bridges. Has the state shown improvement in terms of over the past few years in terms of how many of its bridges are in poor condition compared to where we are now?
Certainly. If you go back to 2013, when the state passed a comprehensive long-term funding boost, at that time, Pennsylvania was either the first or second in terms of the share of bridges in poor condition. It was up well over 20%. And they recognized they had a significant challenge. And what we see with poor bridges is you have, on one hand, you have some major bridges to reconstruct. They're going to be very costly. And we did look at the percentage. But overall, you see the largest share are typically smaller bridges, oftentimes at the rural area. And so states are trying to balance that. And so what Pennsylvania did was really put in place a very aggressive plan to start to address these bridges, both some of your most heavily traveled, most expensive bridges to repair, but then also how do you address these smaller secondary bridges? And oftentimes they would combine several of those bridges into one package, which seemed to work. There was an economy of scale, if you will. And so we've seen significant progress. Pennsylvania, thankfully, is not, at the top of the list. And I'm happy that we can look up the actual specific numbers, but we saw a significant improvement since that period. We start to see that stalling a bit, and I think that's under the weight of tremendous inflation that's really started to impact their ability to make further progress. And in fact, it seems likely that unless they can identify additional funding at the state level, that they will begin, unfortunately, to start to see those numbers go back up in terms of bridges in poor condition.
Thank you.
And our next question comes from Ed Blazina in Pittsburgh. Ed, I've promoted you to a panelist, and once you join, you should be able to ask your question live. Okay, Ed, you can go ahead. You'll need to unmute your line.
Thank you. Couple of questions. First, wanted to ask Rocky how this study came about. How was it requested? Was it something the counties or the state asked for, or why did you decide to do it here? And the other question is, I'm sure everybody is aware that Pennsylvania is going through a funding crisis right now with the budget coming up. There's a big fight over how much money to use for mass transit. And part of that is the more rural counties pushing for more money for their roads and bridges. I wanted to get some thoughts from the panelists on how that will work out, because both of those obviously are important issues that need funding, and there's a limited pot of money available.
Sure. And let me take the first part of that question, and then I'll ask Robert and Matt, who have perhaps greater insights than we do to state legislative issues. TRIP as an organization, we're not a lobbying organization. We don't take positions or promote legislation, but clearly we are advocates for a transportation system that's safe, that's reliable, and well maintained. So as in the course of a year, we'll do anywhere from 10 to 15 state reports. In fact, this is the 9th we've released this year, so maybe we'll actually go beyond that number. And so we tend to look at states individually in terms of, is this a year where we're seeing some significant challenges? Unfortunately, that brings us back to Pennsylvania on a regular basis. And we also look at what's really the challenge that they need to look at. We did a news conference 2 weeks ago in North Carolina, focused strictly on their recovery from Hurricane Helene, which devastated the western part of the state. So in that case, that was our focus. Earlier the year, we were in New York State focusing very much on preservation, which unfortunately continues to be a huge challenge. So in the case of Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania, excuse me, we recognize that the states continue to have a significant challenge, and we felt on the local system, perhaps it doesn't get enough attention. So we chose to come into Pennsylvania today, certainly to advocate for keeping their local roads safe and reliable, but also well maintained. So we really look for opportunities where we think our reports are timely in terms of educating the public on the condition of their system. And now I think I'd ask Robert and Matt, their thoughts, perhaps if they're willing, if they have any to share on what's happening in Harrisburg, at least at the legislative level.
Well, I would just add, Ed, it's a very good point. We completely understand it. We have to balance infrastructure, roads, bridges, and other infrastructure along with public transportation. Here in Schuylkill County, we have a public transportation system. I'm on the board of it, the Schuylkill Transportation Authority. Why is that? Why is it important even in a rural area? We have a population 60 and over that's well over 20% of our population, and many of those people rely on public transportation just to do common shopping needs and getting to doctor's appointments and things like that. So at the end of the day, public transportation cannot be ignored. But we've always, for decades now in Pennsylvania, knew that we had to do a balancing act. And it begins with understanding that this is a core element of government, that we cannot have infrastructure, good roads, good bridges, good public transportation without the government subsidizing it. So it is, in our opinion, a government responsibility. And we have to lobby for where we think and prioritize where we believe the most serious needs are. We currently, as I think the whole world knows, have a pretty big crisis in public transportation in and around Philadelphia with the SEPTA system. I know Allegheny area has had challenges in the past. So, you know, when you're in major metropolitan areas, sometimes it even becomes even more critical. But we cannot walk away from the infrastructure that carries our commerce, that is essential to Pennsylvania being at the top of commerce and all the economic development. Here in Schuylkill County, we have not only a lot of manufacturing, but we have a huge element of logistics and distribution that is taking products from Schuylkill County across the entire United States. And so they will not do that. They will not stay or come here without good roads and bridges. And this is a huge challenge. And it's not just on interstate, it's on connectors like I referred to before, like Pennsylvania State 61, which is, again, a multiple stretch of highway that has had to be dealt with in segments of repair because it could not all be done, obviously, at one time. It will always be a budget challenge, and we're fighting a lot of other issues in Pennsylvania that it has to be up against, but we will never be the great state, the great Commonwealth we want to be if we do not dedicate resources to our infrastructure and in particular roads and bridges.
Yeah, just to follow up, I agree totally with everything that Bob just said. We have to remember that the urban centers like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are always first and foremost on the minds of our state legislators. Their needs are always under consideration. But often it seems like our rural communities are kind of, you know, left to fend for themselves and forgotten about. We have to remember that agriculture is the #1 economic driver in our state. And for that to continue to happen, we're going to require solid roads and bridges to increase our commerce and get our products from point A to point B. It's also not only if this is an issue that's just important for agriculture, but you look across our communities, it's the needs for our schools to transport their children on school buses. It's the needs for our EMS staff, our fire trucks and ambulances to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible in situations where minutes are critical and the difference can be in just a few minutes can make a significant impact on somebody's life. So while we understand the situations and the challenges that urban centers are facing, we also want to make sure that the needs of our rural communities are not forgotten.
Thank you, Matt. I think I see another question.
Yep. So I have another question from Steve Bonell. It was also in Pittsburgh. So Steve, I've promoted you to panelist. Once you unmute your line, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks all for doing this. I think any of you, maybe Rocky might be best to handle this. I think you said you've been doing these reports since 1971. Just historically, I guess, especially with this state, how does this kind of compare just the conditions of the roads and bridges, as simple as that sounds?
You mean comparing Pennsylvania to other states?
I guess just Pennsylvania in the years since 1971, since you've been doing these.
Oh, okay, so trends, and you know, and subsequent to this also, you know, if you contact us, we can go ahead and look up some additional data. But you know, what really strikes me, you know, having worked in Pennsylvania for a number of years, again, is the bridge story. You know, the state, it's similar to Oklahoma, where we're sort of the two states that sort of competed to have the greatest share of bridges in poor condition, unfortunately. And in both states, I think really put a lot of resources into it. But I think the challenge in Pennsylvania is now with inflation, that progress is really stalled and is now starting to reverse. And so that's where the states. The other thing that jumps out in Pennsylvania obviously the system is quite old in terms of you have bridges, the majority of them are at the point where oftentimes many of them are past the point where they can be simply repaired and oftentimes need to be replaced or reconstructed. You've also are running into that with your major highways across the state where you're reaching a point of diminishing returns where some of the routine repairs that might have kept a roadway in relatively rideable condition for 6 or 7 years isn't lasting quite as long because the underlying sub-bases have deteriorated to the point that really you're looking at reconstruction. And it's a state that's very heavily traveled. And so you have a lot of wear and tear in the system, and that's hard to turn around. And that's really what state and local governments are really grappling with in Pennsylvania.
The other question, obviously, there's the state level and the budget debates. I'm wondering, everyone's been kind of following the federal level and just overall general budget deliberations. Is any funding at risk, or is it mostly the bipartisan infrastructure law? Is most of that money kind of allocated already to projects? I'm just wondering if any of this is kind of tied up in, for lack of a better phrase, the politics of DC right now, I guess.
At the federal level, the bipartisan bill continues to distribute money at the state level. It's at a level as was anticipated when the program was passed in 2021, but it does expire. It's September 30th of 2026. So really about another 15 months out. Certainly both the House and Senate appropriate committees are looking at subsequent bills beyond that. But there's a lot of ground to cover over the next 15 months and unclear if the funding levels will be similar to what is currently in the bill. Overall, states, when this program was passed at the end of 2021, saw about a 30% increase in funds available for surface transportation. But as we know, since then, highway construction cost inflation has been 54%. And so, I mean, you do the math. Obviously, the program was critical to keep the wheels on, but unfortunately, really didn't achieve what was hoped, which was a significant boost in the ability of state governments using that money to expand their programs. Unfortunately, really what it's done is allowed them to maintain their programs, but actually with inflation now at a diminished level. So certainly there's a lot of discussion by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Senate Environment and Public Works Committees to move forward with a long-term federal bill beyond next year. But again, a lot remains to be seen.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions that have come in. So Rocky or Bob or Matt, if there's anything else you'd like to add, you can feel free.
Well, I just want to again thank Robert and Matt for taking time to participate in today's news conference, and certainly all the journalists today who took the time out of their busy day to go ahead and attend the news conference and help provide some of this information to their readers and viewers. And again, myself and Carolyn were available throughout the day. I know there were a few data questions that really would take a little more work on our part to answer. So we're happy to hear throughout the day with any additional questions and respond to them. And with that, we'll conclude today's news conference. And again, thanks for everyone for participating.
Thank you.